Few things in life are better than watching cartoons, but sometimes you watch so many of them that you don't even realize several shows went through major design changes in their characters, and you never noticed. That's exactly the case with the amazing world of Gumball, which recently even had its title changed to The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball. But long before 2025, Cartoon Network's famous Blue Cat already went through visual changes, and many fans of the series didn't even pick up on them. If we go back to 2011, when the first season of the show premiered, we'll notice the characters looked a little different. For example, take a look at Gumball's eyes, and really, all the characters' eyes. They were straight, but slightly rounded at the edges. Then, in the second season released in 2012, the eyes of the main characters dropped that shape and became much more oval. Even the pupils, the little black part, also changed shape, following the new design of the eyes. On top of that, the characters' hands became a lot more detailed as well. By the third season, which kicked off in 2010, the eyes had changed completely, becoming fully round, and the pupils got way smaller. And from that point on, the characters have stayed like that, and up until now we haven't seen more big changes, at least not yet. Another case where we saw brutal changes throughout the seasons is none other than the longest-running animated series in history, The Simpsons. If we go all the way back to 1987, when the very first pilot of the Yellow Family came out, it honestly looked like it had been drawn by a 7-year-old kid because the art style was so weird. Homer wasn't even that fat, and Bart didn't really look like a 10-year-old kid. He looked more like a 20-year-old guy since he was practically the same size as his dad. But it turns out, the problem really was lack of money, because after that Fox poured some cash into the production, and 2 years later the first season was finally released. This time the characters looked way better, but they were still very different from the versions we know today. The more polished art style we see in the current seasons didn't actually get finalized until after The Simpsons movie, which came out in 2007, 20 years after that pilot episode where Bart looked like an adult. And to this day, we can pretty much say the show looks the same, and let's be real, way better than it did in the beginning. So get ready to have your mind blown as we take a look together at all the cartoons that changed over time without you even realizing it. Since we're already talking about famous yellow characters in animation, we can't leave out the Minions. And no, I'm not talking about Gru's earliest little helpers, when they looked more like tiny multicolored aliens wearing auto mechanic overalls. Though, to be fair, they still wear their blue overalls with Gru's emblem. But here's the thing about the Minions. If you watch the very first Despicable Me movie and then check out the most recent one in the franchise, you'll notice that the design of the world's most beloved yellow characters became way more polished, especially their teeth, which were purposely drawn a lot more crooked at first, but later got improved, mostly thanks to the huge success of the little guys, to the point they even got their own solo movie in 2015. That's when their look finally reached the quality and cuteness level we know today, officially becoming the Minions we recognize now. And still sticking with cartoons starring yellow protagonists, let's talk about one who also went through changes, but for a totally different reason. Let's talk about good old SpongeBob. The happiest resident of Bikini Bottom has been around since 1999, and just like any show with tons of seasons, he naturally went through animation improvements over the years. But that's not what we're focusing on here. What we're talking about are the complete design shifts that happened a few times, where SpongeBob and his friends stopped being 2D characters and actually turned into 3D. The best examples of this are the spin-off series Camp Coral released in 2021, which takes place during SpongeBob and his friends' teenage years. But even a year before that spin-off, the movie, The SpongeBob Movie, Sponge on the Run, was also entirely made in 3D, and the next SpongeBob movie is also set to follow the same style, even though the main series still keeps being produced in classic 2D. So in other words, SpongeBob has changed and hasn't changed at the same time. Get it? Yeah, me neither. Now let's talk about one of the biggest hits of the last few years, the show about the little blue Australian pup, Bluey. The series has been on the air since 2018, but back in 2016, the creators of the show actually made a pilot episode where we can see a completely different version of Bluey, with rougher outlines and even different spots on her back. Of course, she was already adorable back then, but we can definitely say that the injection of money put into the animation helped polish the characters, giving them smoother, rounder outlines that are much more appealing. And that's probably one of the reasons Bluey became the gigantic success it is today. Before we keep going with more shows that went through big design changes over the years, hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss our upcoming videos. You may not realize this, but there are some cartoons so old that they've gone through more redesigns than the number of fingers on both your hands. That's exactly the case with Tom and Jerry. The animated series that made the cat and mouse rivalry famous around the world originally debuted in 1940, way before your grandparents, or even great-grandparents, were around. Since then, the two main characters have kept their core traits, Tom being the gray cat and Jerry the brown mouse, but their designs have been altered no less than 13 times. The most recent redesign came in the latest version released not long ago, where the characters looked noticeably different. Still, as a fan of the show, I thought it was great. But if you think Tom and Jerry was the only cartoon to survive for over 80 years with multiple redesigns, you'd be mistaken. The truth is, there's another show just as old and just as famous, Woody Woodpecker. Also created in 1940, the crazy red-headed bird has gone through fewer redesigns than Tom and Jerry, but still quite a few, 9 different versions in total. What's interesting is that, just like with many other older cartoons, Woody's very first design actually made him look more like a real bird, which makes sense since that's what he is. But over the years, the tree-pecking bird picked up a few new features like white gloves, and even his red crest kept switching back and forth between being styled backward and forward. And for now, the most recent version of the character came in the live-action CGI hybrid movie that dropped on Netflix in 2024. But if there's one thing that never changes about him, it's definitely his laugh, that unmistakable sound everybody knows. Still talking about birds, but moving from woodpeckers to waterbirds. One of the greatest characters in Disney history is also one of the ones that went through the most changes. Donald Duck is known as one of the main faces of the biggest entertainment company in the world, right alongside Mickey Mouse. But what many people don't know is that when he was first created, before Woody Woodpecker and even before Tom and Jerry back in 1931 for a comic book, he actually looked a lot more like a real duck you'd see in nature. And instead of the classic blue or black sailor outfit we're used to seeing him wear, he originally had on a green jumpsuit. Just 3 years later, when he appeared in an animated short, his look had already changed and he was sporting the sailor outfit. But the version that most closely resembles the Donald we know today was finalized not long after in 1936. From then on, the funniest talking duck in animation went through so many redesigns and had so many versions across comic books, movies, and TV shows that it's honestly hard to count them all, but the number is definitely over 20. But without a doubt, the best animated series featuring him is Quack Pack from 1996, where Donald's 3 nephews are reimagined as teenagers. Seriously, that show is hilarious. And the most recent version of Scrooge McDuck's not-so-favorite nephew was in the reboot of DuckTales, where all the classic characters from the 1988 cartoon returned for a brand new round of amazing adventures. And between us, Donald is honestly one of my all-time favorite characters. Now leaving Disney behind and heading back to Cartoon Network, one of the most beloved animated shows of recent years was Teen Titans Go! But what not everyone knows is that the original Teen Titans series was not only more successful than the newer one, but it also had a much more serious tone, focusing heavily on the fight against evil. And that's not the only version of DC's teenage superhero team. In recent years, several animated movies, including crossovers with the Justice League but centered on the Teen Titans, were released, bringing even more realistic takes on the heroes. All of this just proves that the Teen Titans have countless versions out there, each one appealing to a different type of fan. In 2005, Cartoon Network launched what would become its biggest hit for the next 10 years, Ben 10. And if you've never heard of this amazing show, then you're probably an alien invading Earth. The series follows young Ben Tennyson, a 10-year-old boy who accidentally comes into possession of the Omnitrix, the most powerful weapon ever created, that allows him to transform into some of the coolest aliens in the universe. But unlike many other cartoons where the main character stays the same age for decades, like The Simpsons, Gumball, or SpongeBob SquarePants, the creators of Ben 10 decided to let Ben actually grow up over the seasons. That's why in 2008, Ben 10 Alien Force was released, where Ben is now 15 years old, with a very different appearance, along with Kevin and Gwen as part of his team. The same character designs carried over into the third series, Ben 10 Ultimate Alien, which premiered in 2010. The thing is, even though that series actually had an ending, Cartoon Network wasn't ready to stop cashing in. So in 2012, they launched Ben 10 Omniverse, with Ben still at 16, but in a completely different universe, alongside new characters and a totally revamped art style. That reboot ran until 2014, and as expected, another reboot came just 2 years later in 2016. This time, Ben was back to being 10 years old again, but in a completely new design, with a rounder face and eyes compared to all the earlier versions. So yeah, Ben 10 has had at least 4 different versions so far. And counting. Who knows, maybe we'll even get a live-action movie someday. That's the end of our list, but don't head out just yet. We've got 2 more videos lined up right here for you to keep having fun. Pick one and let's jump into the next one.